The sound of my wife moaning another man's name in our bedroom wasn't exactly how I planned to spend my Tuesday afternoon. But life has a twisted sense of humor, doesn't it? I stood frozen in the hallway, briefcase still in hand, listening to Jennifer's breathless whispers through our bedroom door. Oh, Paul. Yes. Right there. Paul. Her boss. The same pompous jerk who'd been mentoring her at the law firm for the past 6 months. The same guy who drove that ridiculous BMW and wore suits that cost more than my monthly salary as a civil engineer. My hands shook as I set down my briefcase. 23 years of marriage, and this is what I get. I could hear the bed creaking rhythmically, accompanied by Jennifer's theatrical performance. She never sounded like that with me. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Not because I'm some creep, but because I knew Jennifer would try to gaslight me later. She'd perfected the art of making me question my own reality over the years. "Danny, you're being paranoid," she'd say. "Paul is just helping me advance my career." Well, he was certainly helping her advance something. I pushed open the bedroom door. They were so lost in their little performance they didn't notice me at first. Paul's hairy back was glistening with sweat, his expensive suit crumpled on my side of the bed. Jennifer's legs were wrapped around him like she was claiming territory. "Honey, I'm home," I announced. The reaction was priceless. Paul scrambled off Jennifer so fast he fell off the bed, landing hard on the hardwood floor. Jennifer yanked the sheets up to cover herself, her face cycling through shock, guilt, and then settling on defiance. "Danny, you're supposed to be at work." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Yeah, well, the Henderson project wrapped up early. Lucky me, right? Paul was frantically trying to put on his pants while hopping on one foot. "Look, Danny, this isn't what it looks like." "Really? Because it looks like you're screwing my wife in my bed. But hey, maybe I need glasses." Jennifer found her voice. "We need to talk about this like adults, Danny." "Adults? You mean like how adults honor their marriage vows? That kind of adult behavior?" I walked over to Paul, who was still struggling with his shirt buttons. He was shorter than me, probably 50 pounds heavier, with the soft build of a man who'd never done a day of manual labor in his life. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Now, Danny, let's be reasonable." I grabbed him by his half-buttoned shirt and dragged him toward the front door. He stumbled, trying to grab his shoes and jacket. Jennifer was yelling behind us, something about being civilized, but I wasn't listening anymore. I shoved Paul out onto the front porch in his bare feet. "Stay away from my wife, stay away from my house, and if I see that BMW in my driveway again, I'll introduce it to my sledgehammer." Paul straightened his shirt, trying to recover some dignity. "You can't threaten me, Danny. I have connections in this town. And I have a tool shed full of ways to make your life miserable. Want to test which one of us is more creative?" He hurried to his car, still barefoot. I watched him drive away, then walked around to my garage. Jennifer was right behind me, now wearing a robe. "What are you doing?" I grabbed a 5-pound bag of sugar. "Science experiment." "Danny, don't do anything stupid." "Stupid? Like trusting my wife? Like believing her lies for 6 months? That kind of stupid?" I walked over to Paul's usual parking spot in our driveway. He'd left a small oil stain. I poured the sugar over it in a neat pile, then went back for more supplies. "You're having a breakdown," Jennifer said. "This isn't like you." "You're right. The old Danny would have believed your excuses. The old Danny would have blamed himself. But the old Danny just watched his wife screw her boss in their marriage bed, so maybe it's time for a new Danny." I spent the next hour methodically destroying every trace of Paul's presence in my house. His expensive cologne went down the drain. The wine he'd brought went into the sink. The flowers he'd sent Jennifer got fed to the garbage disposal one stem at a time. Jennifer alternated between tears and anger, but I wasn't buying either performance anymore. She'd shown me who she really was, and I was finally paying attention. My phone rang around 8 p.m. The caller ID showed Police Chief Riley's number. "Danny Harlan?" "Yeah, Chief, what's up?" "I need you to sit down, son. There's been an incident." Riley only called people son when he was delivering bad news. "Your sister Allison and her husband Mike? There was an attack at their restaurant tonight. Gang hit, looks like. They didn't make it, Danny. I'm sorry." The phone slipped from my hand. Allison, my baby sister who'd raised me after our parents passed. The one person in this world who'd never lied to me, never betrayed me, never let me down. "Danny? You there?" I picked up the phone. "I'm here." "There's more. These guys, they're connected to some money laundering operation. We think they hit the wrong target, but by the time they figured it out..." Riley paused. "Listen, Danny, officially I have to tell you to let us handle this. Unofficially, you've got maybe 60 hours before they realize their mistake and clean up loose ends, if you understand what I'm saying." I understood perfectly. Riley was giving me a countdown, 60 hours to do what needed to be done before the system failed me the way it had failed Allison. Jennifer was standing in the doorway, having heard enough to know something terrible had happened. For a moment, her face showed genuine concern. "Danny? What's wrong?" I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd promised to stand by me through everything. This woman who'd been lying to my face while my sister was getting murdered. "Everything," I said. "Everything is wrong." I walked past her to my home office and opened my laptop. If I had 60 hours, I was going to make them count. And if Paul thought he had connections in this town, he was about to learn what real connections looked like. The old Danny was gone. The new one had work to do. Chapter 2. The countdown begins. 57 hours remaining. I hadn't slept. Instead, I'd spent the night doing what I do best, engineering solutions to complex problems. The problem was simple enough. My wife was screwing her boss, my sister was gone, and the people responsible for both situations thought they were untouchable. Time to prove them wrong. Jennifer had left for work early, probably to warn Paul about my unstable behavior. That was fine. I needed them predictable right now. My first stop was Allison's restaurant. The police tape was still up, but Riley had given me a key. Walking through the door where my sister had spent her last moments should have broken me. Instead, it focused me. The place was trashed. Chairs overturned, register smashed, kitchen equipment destroyed. But this wasn't a robbery. Professional thieves don't leave behind expensive liquor or trash a commercial freezer for fun. This was a message that went to the wrong address. I found what I was looking for in Allison's office, her customer database. She'd always been meticulous about record keeping. Every catering job, every private party, every business lunch she'd handled for the past 5 years was documented, including the monthly meetings she'd catered for Brennan, Kessler and Associates, Jennifer's law firm. My hands started shaking as I scrolled through the entries. Paul Brennan, private dining room, always paid in cash. Always the same guest list of city contractors and union bosses. Always scheduled around major city construction projects. Allison hadn't been the wrong target. She'd been catering money laundering meetings for Paul's operation, and someone had decided she knew too much. My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. "Coming home early today. We need to talk." I typed back, "Can't wait." 54 hours remaining. I drove to Jennifer's office building and parked across the street. Paul's BMW was in the executive parking spot, freshly washed, probably trying to impress his next conquest. The building had good security, but I'd designed the electrical systems 3 years ago. Every building has weaknesses if you know where to look. I waited until lunch rush, then walked in through the service entrance wearing my old contractor's uniform. Nobody questions a guy with a clipboard and a tool belt. Paul's office was on the third floor, corner suite with a view of the river. I could hear him on a conference call through the door, his voice full of that fake authority he used to intimidate people. No, no, no. The Henderson project payments go through the usual channels. Clean money only on the books. The Henderson project. My project. The one that had finished early, letting me come home to find him with Jennifer. Suddenly, that early completion didn't seem so coincidental. I picked the lock on his office door. Simple pin tumbler, probably installed when the building was new. Paul was the kind of guy who thought expensive meant secure. His computer was logged in, probably because he was too important to remember passwords. I plugged in my USB drive and started copying files. Financial records, client databases, email archives, everything a civil engineer with a grudge might find useful. The conference call was still going. Tell Castellano we appreciate his patience, but the restaurant situation is handled. No more loose ends. Castellano. I knew that name from the construction bids. Vincent Castellano, who owned half the concrete companies in the city and had connections to people who made problems disappear. I finished copying the files and moved to Paul's personal desk. His checkbook was in the top drawer, along with a bottle of expensive scotch and a box of condoms. Classy guy. But it was the appointment book that made me smile. Every meeting with Jennifer for the past 6 months was marked with a little heart. Lunch with Jay. Strategy session with Jay. Performance review with Jay. Performance review. Right. I photographed every page, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Paul was still talking on his conference call when I slipped out. 51 hours remaining. Jennifer was waiting when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and her concerned wife expression. "We need to discuss what happened yesterday," she said. "You're clearly upset about Allison, and you're taking it out on me and Paul." "Taking it out on you? Jennifer, I caught you in bed with another man." "It's complicated, Danny. Paul and I have a connection that goes beyond just work. We understand each other in ways that—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop talking." I pulled out my laptop and opened the photos from Paul's appointment book. Jennifer's face went pale as she recognized her own handwriting in the margins. "Where did you get those?" "Same place I got these." I showed her the financial records. "And these." The email threads between Paul and his money-laundering contacts. "And my personal favorite, these." The last folder contained security camera footage from the restaurant district. Paul's BMW parked outside Allison's place the night she was attacked, 3 hours before the official incident time. Jennifer was staring at the screen like she was seeing a ghost. "Danny, I don't understand what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Paul's been laundering money through construction projects. Allison was catering his meetings. When someone decided she was a liability, Paul gave them the green light." "That's insane. Paul would never what? Cheat with a married woman? Lie to federal investigators? Conspire to eliminate witnesses?" Jennifer stood up, her coffee cup shaking in her hands. "You're scaring me, Danny. This isn't like you." "You're right. The old me would have trusted you. The old me would have believed your lies and let Paul destroy my family. But the old me didn't know his wife was sleeping with the man who got his sister eliminated." I closed the laptop and looked at her. Really looked at her. When had she become a stranger? "Here's what's going to happen, Jennifer. You're going to call Paul and tell him to meet you at the Riverside Hotel tonight, room 237. Tell him you have information about a problem that needs to be handled." "I won't do that." "Yes, you will. Because if you don't, these files go to the FBI, the state police, and the local media. Your law firm will be shut down. Paul will spend the rest of his life in federal prison, and you'll be lucky to get a job serving coffee." She was crying now, but I felt nothing. Sympathy was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. "Danny, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, start over." "Start over? Jennifer, You helped him destroy my sister. There's no coming back from that. My phone rang. Riley's number again. Danny, we need to talk. Can you meet me at the station? On my way. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. Jennifer was still sitting at the table, staring at the laptop screen. Room 237, I reminded her. 8 p.m. Don't disappoint me again. 48 hours remaining. The countdown was just getting started. Chapter 3. Gasoline and Games. 45 hours remaining. Chief Riley looked like he'd aged 10 years since yesterday. His office smelled like stale coffee and cigarettes, and the files on his desk were thick enough to use as building materials. Sit down, Danny. We need to discuss your activities. My activities? Paul Brennan filed a complaint this morning. Says you broke into his office, stole confidential files, and threatened him with physical violence. I leaned back in the chair. That's interesting. Did he mention what he was doing in my bedroom yesterday afternoon? Riley rubbed his temples. That's a personal matter between you and your wife. Breaking and entering is a felony. So is money laundering. So is conspiracy to commit assault. So is accessory to manslaughter. I pulled out a USB drive and slid it across his desk. Everything you need is on there. Financial records, email communications, meeting schedules. Paul's been washing money through city construction contracts for at least 2 years. Riley plugged in the drive and started scrolling through files. His expression got darker with each document. Where did you get this? Does it matter? It's all legitimate business records. Paul was careless with his computer security. Danny, even if this is all accurate, you can't just take justice into your own hands. We have procedures. Procedures? Chief, your procedures got my sister eliminated. Your procedures let Paul Brennan operate a criminal enterprise out of a respected law firm. Your procedures are why I'm sitting here instead of planning Allison's funeral. Riley was quiet for a long moment, studying the files. Finally, he looked up. What do you want from me? Time. Just give me time to handle this my way. I can't officially sanction vigilante justice, Danny. You know that. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be slow processing Paul's complaint. Maybe lose some paperwork. Maybe take a long weekend. Riley closed the laptop. Hypothetically speaking, if someone were to take matters into their own hands, they'd need to be very careful not to break any laws. Hypothetically. Hypothetically, someone might focus on social and financial consequences rather than physical ones. Hypothetically. And hypothetically that someone would have maybe 40 hours before federal investigators start asking questions about these files. We shook hands. Riley's grip was firm, and his eyes held a promise I understood perfectly. 42 hours remaining. The Riverside Hotel was exactly the kind of place Paul would choose for his affairs. Expensive, discreet, and far enough from downtown that he wouldn't run into clients or colleagues. I'd arrived 2 hours early to set up. Room 237 was on the second floor with a clear view of the parking lot. I'd rented 238 next door and drilled a small hole through the adjoining wall. Amazing what you can accomplish with basic construction tools and a maintenance uniform. Jennifer arrived first, looking nervous and overdressed. She'd chosen a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Paul's influence, no doubt. Paul showed up 20 minutes later in a different BMW. Apparently, he'd traded in the one I'd seen at Allison's restaurant. Guilty conscience, maybe. I watched through the peephole as they met in the hallway. Jennifer was shaking, but Paul seemed confident. He probably thought this was just another romantic encounter. They went into 237. I pressed my ear to the wall and listened. What's this about, Jen? You sounded scared on the phone. Danny knows, Paul. He knows everything. Knows what? About us? So what? He's a pathetic little engineer who can't satisfy his own wife. What's he going to do? He has files, Paul. Financial records, emails, meeting schedules. He knows about the construction contracts and the money washing. He knows about Allison. There was a long silence. When Paul spoke again, His voice was different, colder. What exactly did you tell him? Nothing. I swear, Paul, he got the information somewhere else. That's impossible. Those files are encrypted, stored on secure servers. Unless... Another silence. I could hear Paul pacing. Unless someone with system access helped him. Someone who knew where to look. Paul, you're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. If Danny has those files, we're both finished. The feds will freeze every account, investigate every transaction. They'll connect me to Castellano, and once that happens... What are you saying? I'm saying your husband just signed both our elimination warrants. Castellano doesn't leave loose ends. Jennifer started crying. This is all your fault. You said no one would ever know. You said it was just business. Shut up and let me think. I'd heard enough. Time for phase 2. I knocked on their door. Room service. We didn't order room service, Paul called out. Complimentary champagne from management, sir, for the happy couple. I heard whispering, then footsteps. Paul opened the door with a forced smile. That's very thoughtful, but we didn't... I pushed past him into the room, wheeling a service cart. Jennifer was sitting on the bed, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Surprise? Paul tried to grab me, but I was ready. I spun the cart around, catching him in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping. Now, Paul, that's no way to treat your brother-in-law. Danny, what are you doing here? Jennifer's voice was barely a whisper. I'm here to discuss your future employment opportunities. Both of you. I opened the champagne bottle with a theatrical pop. Let's toast to new beginnings, shall we? Paul was straightening up, his face red with anger and embarrassment. You're insane, Danny. Completely insane. Maybe. But I'm also right. You've been washing money through city contracts, using Allison's restaurant for meetings, and when someone decided she was a liability, you gave them the green light. That's not how it happened? Then tell me how it did happen, Paul. Explain to me why your car was parked outside her restaurant 3 hours before the attack. Paul's face went pale. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him the security footage. Traffic cameras are wonderful things, especially when you know which ones to check. Jennifer was staring at the screen. Paul, is that really your car? It's not what you think, Jen. I was just what? Just coordinating with Castellano's people? Just making sure they had the right target? Paul lunged at me, but I was expecting it. I stepped aside and let him crash into the service cart. Champagne and ice went everywhere. Careful, Paul. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself, although I suppose that's Castellano's job now, isn't it? I helped him to his feet with exaggerated courtesy. Here's the situation, folks. Those files I copied, they're already in the hands of people who know how to use them. Federal investigators, state police, local media. By tomorrow morning, your little operation will be front-page news. Jennifer was sobbing now. Danny, please. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, Jennifer. And now you both get to live with the consequences. I headed for the door, then turned back. Oh, and Paul, you might want to find a new place to stay tonight. I hear Castellano doesn't appreciate loose ends. I left them there, Paul trying to comfort Jennifer while calculating his own survival odds. The champagne was still fizzing on the carpet, mixing with Jennifer's tears. 39 hours remaining. Time to turn up the heat. Chapter 4. Double crosses and breakdown. 36 hours remaining. I spent the night in my office, monitoring police scanners and news feeds. Paul had checked out of the hotel at 3 a.m. and driven straight to the airport. His BMW was still in long-term parking, but the man himself had vanished. Jennifer came home around dawn, looking like she'd aged a decade overnight. She found me in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the morning news on my tablet. He's gone, she said. I know. He left me, Danny. Just abandoned me. 20 years I've worked at that firm and he threw me away like garbage. I looked up from my tablet. How does it feel? What? Being betrayed by someone you trusted. Having your whole world collapse because someone you loved decided you were expendable. How does it feel, Jennifer? She stared at me, finally understanding. This is about more than just the affair, isn't it? This is about Allison. This is about you helping a man who got my sister eliminated. This is about you choosing him over 23 years of marriage. I never chose him over you. Really? Then why didn't you come to me when you found out about the money laundering? Why didn't you report Paul to the authorities when you realized what he was doing? Jennifer sat down at the table, her hands shaking. I didn't know. Not about Allison, not about any of it. But you knew something was wrong. You knew Paul was paying for things he shouldn't have been able to afford. You knew those private meetings weren't legitimate legal business. I suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. Because believing it would have meant giving up your affair. Believing it would have meant admitting you were sleeping with a criminal. My phone rang. Unknown number. Danny Harlan? Speaking. This is Vincent Castellano. I think we need to talk. About what? About mutual friends who seem to have created problems for both of us. Can you meet me at the construction site on 5th Street? 1 hour. Jennifer was watching me with wide eyes. Who was that? Your boyfriend's business partner. I stood up and grabbed my jacket. Jennifer caught my arm. Danny, don't go. Please. Whatever this is about, we can handle it together. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve. Such a small gesture, but it was 20 years too late. There is no together anymore, Jennifer. You made sure of that. I pulled free and headed for the door. Behind me, I could hear her starting to cry again. 33 hours remaining. The construction site was one of mine, a new office complex that would house 3 floors of lawyers, accountants, and other professional parasites. The irony wasn't lost on me. Castellano was waiting by the concrete mixer, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. He was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 60 years old, with silver hair and the kind of calm demeanor that suggested violence was just another business tool. Mr. Harlan, thank you for coming. Didn't seem like I had much choice. There's always a choice. The question is whether you're smart enough to make the right one. One of his men stepped forward, but Castellano waved him back. Your friend Paul has caused me considerable inconvenience. Disappeared overnight, left behind a mess that could implicate several legitimate businesses. Paul's not my friend. No, I suppose he's not. Sleeping with your wife, getting your sister involved in business, that wasn't her concern. That must be very painful. I kept my expression neutral. What do you want, Mr. Castellano? I want Paul Brennan. I want him back here to clean up his mess before federal investigators start asking uncomfortable questions. And you think I can help you find him? I think you're the reason he ran. Those files you copied, the evidence you've been spreading around. You've made him desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Castellano walked closer, his voice dropping to a conversational tone. Here's my proposal, Mr. Harlan. You help me locate Paul, and I'll make sure the people responsible for your sister's unfortunate accident face appropriate consequences. What kind of consequences? The permanent kind. I pretended to consider his offer. And if I refuse? Then you become part of the problem that needs to be solved. One of his men opened his jacket just enough to show the gun underneath. Subtle. I need time to think about it. Of course, 24 hours should be sufficient. Castellano handed me a business card. Call me when you've made your decision. They walked away, leaving me alone with the concrete mixer and my thoughts. 24 hours to deliver Paul, or become another loose end. Time to get creative. 30 hours remaining. I drove to Jennifer's office building. The parking lot was buzzing with activity. News vans, police cars, and federal agents with clipboards and serious expressions. Jennifer was standing by her car, holding a cardboard box of personal belongings. Her face was streaked with tears, and her usually perfect hair was disheveled. "They fired me," she said as I approached. "Effective immediately. Security escorted me out like I was a criminal." "Are you?" "What?" "A criminal, Jennifer. Did you knowingly participate in Paul's money laundering operation? No, I don't think so. I handled some of the paperwork, but I thought it was legitimate. What kind of paperwork? Contract modifications, payment authorizations, client communications, standard paralegal work. I took the box from her hands and set it on the hood of her car. Inside were the usual office supplies, a few personal photos, and a thick folder of documents. What's in the folder? Copies of everything I worked on for Paul. I thought maybe if I could prove I didn't know what he was really doing. I flipped through the documents. Contract modifications for my construction projects, payment authorizations to shell companies, client communications with coded language about deliveries and special services. Jennifer had been Paul's unwitting accomplice for 2 years. Jennifer, these documents, they're going to use them to build a case against you. But I didn't know. It doesn't matter what you knew, it matters what you did. And what you did was facilitate a criminal conspiracy. She leaned against her car, looking defeated. What am I going to do, Danny? I can't afford a lawyer. I can't even afford rent without my job. For a moment I felt sorry for her. Then I remembered Allison, and the sympathy evaporated. You're going to help me find Paul. I don't know where he is, but you know how he thinks. You know his habits, his contacts, his backup plans. You're going to help me figure out where he's hiding. Jennifer looked up at me with desperate hope. And then what? You'll help me with the legal problems? Then we'll see. It wasn't much of a promise, but it was all she had. 27 hours remaining. We spent the afternoon going through Paul's habits and routines. Jennifer knew more than she realized. His favorite restaurants, his weekend getaways, his college roommate who owned a cabin in the mountains. But it was the offshore banking information that proved most useful. Paul had been moving money to accounts in the Cayman Islands for months, preparing for exactly this kind of emergency. He always said he had an exit strategy, Jennifer admitted. Somewhere he could disappear if things went bad. Where? Costa Rica, I think. He had contacts there, people who could help him start over. I made a note. Costa Rica was a non-extradition country for certain types of financial crimes. Paul had chosen his escape route carefully. My phone buzzed, text message from an unknown number. Stop looking or join your sister. I showed it to Jennifer. Her face went pale. They're watching us. Good. Let them watch. I typed back. Found Paul. Call me. My phone rang 30 seconds later. Castellano's voice was calm, but interested. You work fast, Mr. Harlan. I'm motivated, but I want something in return. Name it. The men who attacked my sister. I want their names. That can be arranged. Where is Paul? First the names, then Paul. There was a pause. Tony Marchetti and Eddie Voss, local contractors who got in over their heads. They're currently residing in the city morgue, victims of an apparent gang dispute. Justice, Castellano style, swift and final. Paul's in Costa Rica, I said. San Jose, probably staying at the Hotel Presidente under the name Michael Patterson. How can you be sure? Because my wife helped him set up his escape plan. She's been more useful than either of us realized. Jennifer was staring at me with a mixture of fear and betrayal. Excellent. My associates will handle Mr. Brennan's extradition. Your cooperation is appreciated. Jennifer grabbed my arm. Danny, what have you done? Paul may be a lying cheater, but you just sent him to his demise. No, Jennifer. Paul sent himself to his demise when he got my sister eliminated. I just helped him arrive at his destination. 24 hours remaining. The countdown was almost over. But I had one more surprise in store. Chapter 5. The Final Hours. 21 hours remaining. Jennifer spent the night on the couch, too scared to go to her apartment and too guilty to ask for forgiveness. I let her stay. I needed her nearby for the final act. The morning news was full of stories about the federal investigation into Brennan, Kessler, and Associates. Reporters had gotten hold of some of the financial records, and the speculation was running wild. Money laundering, organized crime connections, political corruption. Paul's little operation was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater. My phone rang at 8 a.m. Castellano again. Your information was accurate. Mr. Brennan has been located and will be returning to face his responsibilities. Good to hear. However, there's been a complication. It seems Mr. Brennan had one final card to play. Before my associates could reach him, he contacted federal authorities and offered to cooperate in exchange for protection. I felt my stomach drop. Meaning what? Meaning he's provided them with detailed information about money laundering operations, including the names of local conspirators. Your wife's name featured prominently in his testimony. I looked at Jennifer, who was pretending to read a magazine while obviously listening to every word. How prominently? Federal agents will be arresting her within the hour. I thought you should know. Jennifer was staring at me with growing panic. What did he say? Paul's talking to the feds. He's giving them everything, including your involvement in the money laundering. Jennifer dropped her magazine. But I didn't know what I was doing. Try explaining that to a federal prosecutor. Paul's testimony will make it look like you were a willing participant. She started crying again, but I felt nothing. This was justice, not revenge. Paul had thrown her under the bus to save himself, just like she'd thrown away our marriage for a few months of excitement. Danny, please, you have to help me. I'll do anything. Anything? Yes. I'll confess to the affair. I'll testify against Paul. I'll sign divorce papers without asking for anything. Just please, don't let me go to prison. I pretended to think about it. There might be a way. What? Paul's testimony is only valuable if it's credible. But what if the prosecutors found out he'd been lying to them? What if they discovered he'd been manipulating evidence to frame an innocent woman? Jennifer's eyes lit up with desperate hope. How would they find that out? Someone would have to provide them with evidence of Paul's real activities. Someone who had access to his private files, his personal communications, his actual criminal contacts. I have some of that information. Not enough. But I know where to get more. 18 hours remaining. Paul's house was in the expensive part of town, the kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business, and security cameras were considered gauche. I'd been there once before, for a law firm Christmas party that Jennifer had insisted we attend. The house was dark, Paul's housekeeper having been dismissed when he fled the country. I parked 2 blocks away and walked through the backyards, staying in the shadows. Breaking into Paul's house was easier than breaking into his office. Rich people always assume their money makes them safe. They install expensive alarm systems but forget to change the default passwords. Paul's home office was a shrine to his own ego. Diplomas, awards, photographs with local politicians and business leaders. All of it about to become evidence in a federal investigation. But it was his personal safe that contained the real treasures. Financial records going back 5 years, correspondence with Castellano's organization, and most importantly, a detailed ledger showing exactly which city officials had been receiving payments. The mayor, 3 city council members, the head of the planning commission, and 2 judges. Paul hadn't just been laundering money, he'd been buying influence on a massive scale. I photographed everything, then put it all back exactly as I'd found it. Let the federal agents discover this stuff during their official search. It would be much more credible that way. My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. FBI agents just left. They're coming back tomorrow with arrest warrant. I typed back, problem solved. Go to your sister's house and wait for my call. 15 hours remaining. I drove to the federal building downtown and asked to speak with the agent in charge of the Brennan investigation. After an hour of bureaucratic runaround, I was sitting across from Special Agent Sarah Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she'd heard every lie in the book. Mr. Harlan, I understand you have information relevant to our investigation. I have evidence that Paul Brennan has been lying to your prosecutors. He's trying to frame my wife for crimes she didn't commit. I handed her a USB drive containing copies of Paul's real financial records, the ones showing his direct involvement in money laundering and political corruption. Agent Martinez plugged in the drive and started scrolling through files. Her expression got more interested with each document. "Where did you obtain these records?" "Paul left them in his office. I thought someone should preserve them before they mysteriously disappeared." "Mr. Harlan, what you're describing is breaking and entering. What I'm describing is a citizen's arrest of evidence that proves a federal witness is committing perjury." She studied me for a long moment. "Your wife is still going to face charges. These documents don't prove her innocence." "No, but they prove Paul's guilt, and they prove he's been manipulating evidence to minimize his own culpability." Agent Martinez closed the laptop. "We'll need to verify this information independently." "Of course. I'm sure when you search Paul's house, you'll find the originals in his personal safe. The combination is his birthday, E0847. She made a note. "How do you know that?" "Lucky guess. 12 hours remaining." I drove to Jennifer's sister's house, a modest suburban home where Jennifer was hiding from federal agents and her own conscience. She met me at the door, looking haggard and desperate. "Did you talk to them?" "I gave them evidence that Paul's been lying. It should be enough to discredit his testimony against you." "Really? You really think they'll drop the charges?" "I think they'll be too busy prosecuting Paul and his political cronies to worry about a paralegal who got caught in the middle." Jennifer threw her arms around me, sobbing with relief. "Thank you, Danny. I know I don't deserve your help, but thank you." I let her hold me for a moment, then gently pushed her away. "There's something else, Jennifer." "What?" I pulled out a manila envelope. "Divorce papers. I need you to sign them." Her face crumpled. "Danny, please, can't we try to work things out? I made a mistake, but we can get past this." "Some mistakes you don't get past, Jennifer. Some betrayals you don't forgive." "But I love you." "No, you don't. You love the security I represent. You love having someone to fall back on when your other choices don't work out. But you don't love me." She signed the papers with shaking hands, tears dropping onto the legal documents. "What happens now?" "Now you rebuild your life, find a new job, make new friends, learn to live with the consequences of your choices." "And you? What will you do?" I looked at her one last time, memorizing the face of the woman who'd shared my life for 23 years. "I'm going to visit Allison's grave, and then I'm going to figure out how to live without either of you." 8 hours remaining. The cemetery was quiet, just me and the groundskeepers preparing for another funeral. Allison's headstone was simple. Beloved sister, devoted wife, taken too soon. I sat on the grass beside her grave and told her everything. About Jennifer's betrayal, about Paul's crimes, about Castellano's justice and federal investigations, and all the complicated ways that revenge had turned into something resembling justice. "I think you would have approved," I said finally. "You always said people should face the consequences of their actions. Well, they're facing them now." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In a few hours, the 60-hour countdown would be over. Paul was in federal custody, facing charges that would put him away for decades. Jennifer was free but alone, her career and marriage both destroyed by her own choices. And me? I was free too, in a way I hadn't been for years. Free from lies, free from betrayal, free from the exhausting effort of trying to save a marriage that had been over for months. My phone rang one last time. Chief Riley. "Danny, how are you holding up?" "I'm okay, Chief. Better than okay, actually." "Good to hear. Listen, there's something you should know. The federal investigation has expanded. They're looking at city contracts going back 5 years, including some of your projects." I figured they would. "Your name came up as a potential witness, not a suspect. Seems like Paul's been forging your signatures on change orders and payment authorizations. That makes sense. He needed an engineer's approval to make the money laundering look legitimate. The feds want to interview you tomorrow. Nothing to worry about, just routine questions about your professional relationship with Paul. I'll be there. Danny, for what it's worth, I think you handled this whole situation with remarkable restraint. I smiled. Thanks, Chief. That means a lot. 3 hours remaining. I drove home to a house that felt different now. Bigger, somehow. Quieter. Jennifer's things were gone, packed up and moved to her sister's place. The bedroom where I'd found her with Paul had been stripped and repainted. New sheets, new curtains, new memories waiting to be made. I poured myself a drink and sat in my living room, watching the local news coverage of the federal investigation. Paul's photograph was on every channel, along with speculation about political corruption and organized crime connections. Jennifer's name was mentioned briefly as a cooperating witness who had provided valuable information to federal prosecutors. No charges would be filed against her, the reporter said, due to her cooperation and her limited role in the criminal conspiracy. I'd kept my promise. She was free. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find a delivery man with a large envelope. Daniel Harlan? That's me. Inside the envelope was a cashier's check for $50,000 and a handwritten note. Your sister was a good woman who deserved better. This won't bring her back, but it might help you remember her properly. VC. Castellano's final payment. Dirt money, some might call it. I preferred to think of it as justice tax. 1 hour remaining. I walked through my house, turning off lights and locking doors. Tomorrow I would start over. New projects, new relationships, new possibilities. But tonight belonged to endings. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a letter to Allison, telling her about justice and revenge and the thin line between them, about love and betrayal and the price of trust, about 60 hours that had changed everything. When I finished writing, I folded the letter and put it in my jacket pocket. Tomorrow I would leave it on her grave, along with flowers and a promise to live better than the people who had hurt us both. The countdown was over. Paul was facing federal charges. Jennifer was free but alone. The men who had attacked Allison were gone. The corrupt officials who had enabled it all would soon be facing their own reckonings. Justice had been served, with a side of revenge. And I was finally free to figure out what came next.